So this time, like we focus on deepening the relationship. I guess because, I mean, and the process work is maybe has a lot of applications, right? So yeah, so maybe for people who might not know much about the work, maybe we talk about what process work is, and then how it can be helpful in learning about relationship.
Yes, and process work is well, it was first of all, it's really the work of Dr. Arnold Mindell and his colleagues, and he develops process work from a basis of Western depth psychology, initially, Jungian psychology. And then he traveled a lot and studied many different pathways to awareness growth. And he connected with different roots. So he connected with systems theory and whole systems, seeing everything as a part of an interconnected whole. And we also, as human beings, are part of an interconnected whole. And he drew from different sources of inspiration, such as Taoism, shamanic pathways. Mindell himself was a physicist, so quantum theory, systems theory. So it's really, I would say, bridging and integrating Western's more scientific approach and other perspectives, including indigenous views and more Eastern views, and of course it still has a Western slant, and probably bias in the work, which you may or may not want to bring in, but I think it can anyway add to a lot of the knowledge that you, for example, already are working with. Yeah, I think particularly also because process work brings in a dynamic of sociology, which brings in the lens of the dynamics of rank and power, and not only the most obvious dynamics of rank and power, but also the systemic levels of rank and power, how gender, for example, if we take the example of the topic of relationship, which is what we'll be focusing on in this workshop, how gender is very central to that, or homophobia, these different dynamics that can really unconscious prejudice and bias, structural privilege and marginalization dynamics that influence all of our relationships that we take for granted, and often we're blind to that. So I think process work is really helpful in bringing a clearer lens to those systemic issues that influence our dynamics. And also these systemic dynamics get internalized. So often our inner critics around not feeling good enough or feeling that we have to prove ourselves are very much systemic issues, and yet we can feel like it's our own personal failing that we're not good enough. But actually, a lot of those dynamics we've inherited those from our culture, from our worlds, and they're inherent in the world that we're part of. So unless we bring awareness to those dynamics, we're kind of influenced by them continuously. So I think process work can really bring a lens to that. So one of the topics we want to focus on is navigating power dynamics and relationships. So we'll be very much looking at what's the systemic impact here. We can't just ignore the system either that we live in and the culture that we're part of. It's very important to honor that, recognize the traditions that we come from, and honor our ancestors. And at the same time, some of the patterns that have been passed on to us perhaps no longer serve us in those forms. So how can we transform those patterns that perhaps no longer serve us? to serve us better and also to serve the future generations so that we don't perpetuate perhaps dysfunctional or abusive patterns, which perhaps were, inherited from hundreds of years ago, but now can transform. We have that possibility to do that. And that also links to intergenerational trauma, our ancestors, what they've gone through to get to where we are now, and how that impacts us now as the children and grandchildren, great grandchildren, and how can we also, we're freer of the immediate threat. So perhaps now it's possible to bring more awareness to and work with some of those patterns that have been so challenging for those who've come before us.
Wow. Yeah, I'm very impressed how, the way you describe the work, because it's, especially when it's related to the systemic view and also the cultural, something that is beyond, our normal consciousness. Because, when I work with either my own relationship issues or for my clients, I feel like, just listening to you, I become more aware that these forces is the rank and power and privilege or the cultural background or family history has a lot, or even gender, very close or be a influence in relationship. And this is what the work would help us to be aware of, right? All of these dynamics in the background.
Yeah, and also to understand. It can help us to develop more understanding and even compassion for our families and ancestors, and also for the internal struggles that we have ourselves. When we understand the conditions that have created those, and that it's not just my personal failing, it's actually a systemic issue, or something that I've, inherited. It's in the epigenetics. It's the traumas held in the body. So that's one of the reasons that we also work with the body as a source of information and wisdom. So rather than process work is not just talking about certain experiences, it's also accessing what happens in our bodies. And as a facilitator training, it also trains for those of you who would be interested to attend as facilitators. It's a very valuable training, to also start to become aware of what's happening, what happens to you when you're facilitating. Because in process work, there's no such thing as an observer or an impartial facilitator. You are inevitably part of the field. So when you step into a room with a group of people working on whatever the topic is, you start to experience what's in the field, or you could say, what's below the tip of the iceberg. You start to experience that, but often we don't notice it, how it's impacting us, and often we don't know. Even if we do notice there's a tension or a fear or a sadness or anger suddenly arising, we notice it and then we don't know what to do with it, or we think we should just shut it down. And from process work, we would say that's information. How can you work with that? Obviously not just by getting angry with your participants, but if I suddenly start feeling angry or sad, perhaps that's a feeling or an experience in the room with a client or a group that's disavowed or marginalized, often for good reasons. So perhaps I can support the participants to become more aware of it and make it more available to them. And that can then shift the field, shift atmosphere, bring more awareness.
Yeah. So you are saying that basically the information that comes through your body can be in helpful information to unfold what's going on in the room,
Yes.
in that space, what kind of roles that has maybe are being marginalized or being oppressed. So bring it to light and to be handled and be acknowledged, right? Or honored.
Yeah, exactly. Because often what happens in a relationship, let's say conflict, could be with a partner, with a child, with the boss, in a group, in one other person, in a neighborhood, we get triggered very fast. And we go into trauma responses. We get triggered and maybe we get angry. We're not choosing to get angry, which is different. We just
You
get
just get angry.
get angry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Your laugh makes you laugh. You recognize
exactly.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
like I couldn't stop it, right? When we were triggered. So how do you work with it? Yeah.
Yeah, so it might, for some people it's anger. Other people you might freeze. You go into kind of frozen state. You get scared and you get frozen, or maybe you kind of start to disassociate. You actually, it's like you're not quite there anymore. That can also be another response when you get
Mm.
triggered. Or you, some we call it appeasing. You kind of get very friendly. You try to fix it, but at the cost of yourself.
Mm.
You know, don't calm down, dear. Everything's going to be fine.
Just let go. Everything will be okay.
But then, which is okay. I mean, it's great. All these things are definitely useful at different times, but often they're unconscious responses. So I guess here, with let's say anger as an example, start to notice what's the trigger. That
Mm.
sounds so easy, but it's so trigger you get angry or you get triggered or frozen so quickly that we often don't realize that there's a gap between the trigger and the response. And in
Mm-hmm.
that gap, there's a choice point. If you
Mm-hmm.
have done the work and you can have developed what we call a meta communicators, a part of you that can notice that you're getting triggered and then make a decision to step back, not just get angry, notice what's triggering you, and so on. Sounds simple, it's complicated.
Yeah, so often like can be, yeah, very good. Can we go a little further? I mean, because I have cases that I work with, and the trigger sometimes it's reminded a person of his mother demanding him to do something, even though the other person was just asking, you know, like, and then suddenly he got triggered because he has been dealing with all his childhood. And so would you say that this kind of trigger is related to, personal history with, between him as a boy or a man with his mother who has more rank and power, and he reacted to it, and he, more strongly than he should have.
Yes, that's it. You got it.
Mm-hmm.
That usually, I would say, I think we can say usually, often, when we're triggered, it's not just the situation itself that's triggering us. It's exactly what you say. It could be,
The ghost?
yeah, it could be a ghost that reminds you of when your mother told you off, or and you didn't have any power. Exactly. Yeah. So we can work with that, like differentiating between what's happening in the moment and what happened then. And also there can be we can work with what happened, the original situations, working on those original situations, not with your mother probably, but with because it's not really your mum anyway. And I know many people don't like to work on things to do with their parents because, we don't want to dishonor our parents who've done so much for us and so on. But I think, and I think that's very important. And it's not their fault either.
No.
And it's not really working with your actual mother at all. It's working with the impression, the memory. It's like a role. So we leave your mother being your mom and so having a happy life and honoring her, but we can still work on the things that were difficult when we were kids. And yeah, so we'll do some kind of that work, and then that can free up and enable you to differentiate between I'm getting triggered here. This is my issue. What is my issue, and what's actually an appropriate response here?
Right. Yes. So yeah, I'm thinking like in this sense, how to work with this dynamic is that first of all, he become aware of his primary reaction, right? And maybe be aware of his own rank or emotions, right? And maybe I don't know, maybe I'm getting a sense like maybe he also needs to be aware that he has choice and power.
Exactly.
So he's not he's not a choiceless victim anymore. Right?
That's right. That's right. But just have to be careful not to judge the person for their reaction.
Right.
That's also not helpful.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to judge each other and say, oh, you're just a choiceless victim.
Mm.
But actually, people are as they are because there's been a series of circumstances that's led to that. So how can we support them to feel more empowered, actually?
Right, more empowered.
Yeah, more empowered. But then I also want to say something about the different dimensions of reality. So this is also where structural discrimination comes in. Maybe it's taking away just from the family situation. But if I'm being continuously badly treated or marginalized or experience some kind of discrimination throughout my life just because of how I identify, what I look like, what gender I am, this is more than just a personal psychological issue. This is a discriminatory process that's in the system itself. So there could be justification also for being very angry, and just working on your issues with your mum is not enough. It's an important level of it, but there may also be a need to also work at a more legal structural level to try to change the system so that the laws are more fair. Am I explaining myself?
Yes.
So it's not just a cycle. None of these things are just psychological. There can be systemic levels as well, which depending on the situation, right? If you're an immigrant, if your family have been an immigrant, if you are an immigrant, and you're given lower status or lower rank in society, just because of where you're from. This has nothing to do with whether you're a good person or a hard worker or very intelligent. It's just because of the prejudice that's in the society. Then, that's a different level And there's different ways to work with all of that. But we can take into consideration that process work would work with that recognition and validation actually of the structural level, also working with the psychological level or the where you get triggered because it's like your mum. And then we would also go to an even deeper level where, you know, sometimes it's not possible to change our outer circumstances, sadly. And, or it's a very slow process. It's going to take many years. So then all of us can develop a deeper sense of connection to something, you know, our inherent, you could say, I don't know if you would use the word spiritual or nature, that connection within you, where we all have a right to dignity and a connection to our own self-worth and sense of belonging in the world. And supporting people to feel that regardless of circumstances is also very
Yeah, I agree. I think that's important because I don't know how long would it take for you to fix your, personal, psychological, and social issues, but you can, I feel like people can always access to that connection, support from spiritual nature, so it can be more um, groundedness and, empowering.
Exactly. So we'll definitely work with that level. It's not just the socio-psychological levels that we're working with. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, one issue, like even the interpersonal issues between two people can also relate it to systemic issues. Like, one conflict can be related to something in the background. Like, so basically, maybe the conflict or the anger that he got triggered can have a, more meaning than just emotional need, but has like in maybe that's a response to something in injustice in the
Right.
background, right?
Yes,
Mm.
exactly. Yeah. And then maybe just before we finish, I wanted to say something. We're also going to be in the workshop exploring not only the challenges and difficulties, but we said we would also explore pleasure, the areas of pleasure and intimacy in relationship. Because often we can also get in long-term relationships with a partner, um, we can get very focused on the breakdown and what's not working, which is important to work on all those things. But often we're also not supported to really focus on what gives us pleasure and how
Mm.
what evokes intimacy and caring and love actually in relationship. So, you know, we get
Mm.
busy and we forget that our partner is sacred and the
Ah.
relationship is sacred. And how
Mm-hmm.
do we reconnect to those qualities and aspects, and maybe the initial attraction and what we love
Mm.
about the person? How can we refine that? What are our edges? What are we? Where do we back away? How can we work with those in more subtle ways? How do we
Mm.
deepen intimacy in our
Mm-hmm.
relationships? And it could be with a sexual partner, a lover, a wife, a husband, or it could be just with a friend. How do we develop,
Mm.
you know, society? There's so much isolation, and you know, so much isolation in society these days. How can we reestablish more intimate, deeper connections with each other? Um, with our friends, with
Mm.
our neighbors, with our children, with our partners, and access that part, soften and access those parts of ourselves. So we also wanted to work with those aspects of relationship, deepening those aspects.
That's wonderful. I remember from last year, in our 5 days workshop at the ashram, one of people's favorite practice was when you lead the exploration of pleasure, like the feeling of the body. And I don't remember. Do you recall it?
I don't have the exercise to hand, but yes, how to unfold pleasure in the moment.
Ah,
How
yeah.
to unfold pleasure in the moment. And even if you are, and what we call sexual energy, if we chose to work with that, even if you are celibate, even if you have a vow of celibacy, or you're not sexually active currently, you can still work with that energy as it's a life force, right? That emerges. You don't have to be with another person to access that. The vibrant, alive connection to life itself, pulsing through you. How you channel that is really up to you. So we can go beyond just the intimate connection with another if you don't have a partner, don't wish to have a partner.
Wow. Yeah, that's wonderful. So
Yeah.
I like the work that we do because it's it's embodiment. It's not analyzing it, but really to shift our awareness and willingness to be more integrating with things that it's important for us.
Mm.
Mm.
So
So that's great.
maybe that's good for now.